The world didn't slam America's door. It quietly removed the welcome mat and flipped the sign to occupied. At border crossings once routine, truckers now idle while their Canadian counterparts glide through new lanes marked priority. Partner! The Stars and Stripes passport still opens gates, yet procurement officers, factory planners, and grocery buyers are turning north before they look south. Every tariff designed to shield U.S. jobs has become a neon arrow inviting production across the 49th parallel, from Alberta beef to Ontario battery lines. It isn't rejection by enemies. It's a quiet redirection by friends who discovered advantage in America's own rules. What happens when the neighbor we barely noticed starts renovating the entire neighborhood? If you find stories like this worth knowing, don't forget to like and subscribe. It helps us bring you more of what really matters. Across the Pacific, Canada kept signing while Washington kept ripping pages out. When the U.S. walked away from the Trans-Pacific Partnership, Ottawa inked the renamed CPTPP, then polished its free trade pact with Europe. The headlines barely murmured, but tariff lines screamed opportunity. Canadian beef entering Japan now pays just 26% duty, more than 10 points lower than the U.S. levy. And that rate will keep sliding toward single digits over the next decade. On a frosty January dawn outside Moose Jaw, rancher Louis Latrace used to measure overseas demand in faxes. Now, Tokyo buyers track him on WhatsApp, bidding on cattle before the trucks leave his gate. "They called us first for once," he laughs, after shipping his largest ever order, prime rib bound for Osaka's steakhouses that once bought exclusively Texan. Ottawa's economists tally the trend. Exports benefiting from new CPTPP cuts jumped 18% in a single year, driven mainly by meat into Japan and wood into Australia. The payoff ripples far beyond prairie fences. A shuttered packing line in Brooks, Alberta rehired an evening shift. A Saskatoon feed mill doubled rail cars. Port stevedores in Prince Rupert logged Sunday overtime to clear vessels that would have docked at Long Beach had tariff math not changed the map. For every pallet rerouted, a silent message travels with it. Global markets won't wait for American politics to settle. Yet the irony may sting harder than any duty. Washington built tariff walls, hoping to keep competitors out. Ottawa built a bridge straight over them, using the fine print America abandoned. If better deals can beat bigger economies, how many Made in USA labels will end up stamped with maple leaves before Washington notices the quiet convoy crossing north? Back at the border crossing near Windsor, trucker Sheila Carr rolls past stacks of bright red condiment cases labeled French's Proudly Made in Canada. They fill trailers once reserved for Heinz, whose U.S. bottles suddenly carried a 10% surtax when Canada answered Trump's 25th 5% steel tariff with a $12 billion counterstrike aimed at politically sensitive Midwestern brands. Bourbon, lawnmowers, ketchup. Ottawa called it maple syrup diplomacy. No shouting, just surgical pain where campaign yard signs grew thick. The response inside Canadian grocery aisles was instant. French's plant in Leamington, opened after Heinz quit Tomato Town in 2014, added a second shift, then a third, running 24/7 to satisfy shoppers eager for tariff-free sauce. Company. Executives say market share nearly doubled to 9% nationwide in months, powered by labels bragging, "Grown here, made here." The surprise loser sat far beyond condiments. When Heinz scrambled to win shelf space back, Ontario farmers had already replanted tomato acreage. Glass jar suppliers signed fixed-price contracts, and grocery chains rewrote long-term sourcing. Deals that locked American ketchup out even after Washington lifted the metal duties. A maneuver meant as temporary leverage morphed into a permanent supply chain migration. Jobs, acreage, logistics, etched into the business plans of everyone, from label printers in Guelph to bottle cap makers in Montreal. It was never about catch-up alone. It was about proving that a nimble neighbor could turn defensive tariffs into home field revival. If an everyday picnic staple can switch allegiances so fast, what happens when the next round of duties targets industries with billion-dollar stakes? The shelf test suggests an uncomfortable answer. Once consumers taste a new normal, they seldom reach back for the old bottle. Across the wind-swept rail yard in St. Thomas, Ontario, forklift driver Carlos Mendez still remembers the morning the Ford plant went dark. Now he guides cement trucks past towering rebar on Volkswagen's $20 billion gigafactory site, a 370-acre maze of cranes slated to stamp enough battery cells for 1 million vehicles each year. The magnet wasn't just subsidies. It was a side letter inside the USMCA that shields up to 2.6 million Canadian-built cars from any future U.S. national security tariff. Insurance no governor can match. Tier 1 suppliers from Michigan are already leasing warehouses along Highway 401, stamping Made in USA on parts assembled under a maple leaf to keep tariff risk at zero. Ottawa's pledge, up to $13 billion in performance credits, dwarfs any single factory incentive in U.S. history, and convinced Volkswagen to dub the site its largest on Earth. Union halls feel the tilt. In Dearborn, a stamping shop canceled. Saturday, overtime after losing bumper orders to a plastics plant in nearby London, Ontario. Meanwhile, 300 laid-off toolmakers in St. Thomas just clocked their first paychecks in years, machining casings for Volkswagen's PowerCo subsidiary. The noise that left Michigan has returned. Only the payslips read Canadian dollars. Detroit may still sketch the chassis, but the heart of the drivetrain is migrating north. Tariff walls built to freeze foreign competition have conjured an electric supercluster in Canada's cornfields. And when those batteries roll back into U.S. showrooms inside duty-free SUVs, America might realize the loudest disruption wasn't a plant closure. It was a supply chain quietly flipping its compass toward the maple leaf. If the future of U.S. mobility is branded PowerCo, made in Canada, who truly owns the road ahead? Near Val-d'Or, Quebec, geologist Sarah Hunter chips at a vein of spodumene while a drone maps drill sites for investors in Tokyo. It's the front line of a quieter revolution. Ottawa's critical minerals strategy, nearly $4 billion set aside. In 2022, fast-tracks roads, permits, and in-country refining. The impact was swift. As Washington floated fresh auto tariffs, Europe and Japan locked decade-long deals for Canadian lithium, nickel, and cobalt to dodge U.S. policy whiplash. Brussels called it strategic autonomy without the risk premium, while Japanese battery makers pledged to co-finance a Quebec refinery rather than expand in China. Hunter's camp has tripled staff. Local First Nations joint venture partners secured equity stakes, ensuring the boom avoids past extractive mistakes, and environmental reviews that linger years in the U.S. now clear in 18 months. A once mothballed runway shuttles engineers from Germany, and motel owners dust vacancy signs they hadn't touched in years. Meanwhile, a steel mill in Gary, Indiana pays a 5% premium for Quebec nickel, rather than risk Indonesian export. Bans, and the Pentagon has quietly inked pre-purchase agreements for Manitoba cobalt, preferring an ally's markup to an adversary's discount. Every rail car of ore headed south is stamped "processed in Canada," so royalties and research dollars stay north. Minerals vital to U.S. national security have become leverage in Ottawa's pocket, the friendliest of friendly fire. If the rocks that power American jets and electric trucks now answer to Canadian regulators, how long before Washington realizes tariff wars can rewrite the periodic table as easily as they reroute a supply chain? Minerals may power the machines, but people write the code that tells them what to do. So, Canada opened its fastest lane yet. In 2017, while the White House tightened H-1B screws, Ottawa launched the Global Talent Stream, a 2-week visa that feels like a boarding pass. Ask Priya Rao, a machine learning engineer who spent 2 years shuttling between Mumbai and a Silicon Valley contractor, waiting on lottery renewals that never came. One LinkedIn message later, she was in Waterloo. Badge clipped to an office door newly leased by a Seattle cloud giant that couldn't risk another immigration roll of the dice. Within 12 months, her team more than doubled, half made up of Americans whose own spouses gained instant work rights, perks impossible under U.S. rules. Tech visas are only the front door. Ottawa's 2023 Tech Talent Strategy stacked furniture behind it, with open pathways to permanent residency and a pitch delivered on stage at Collision. The conference once courted by Austin, but now branded Toronto's yearly coming out party. Recruiters call it Plan B North. Yet the numbers behave like Plan A. LinkedIn data shows a 15% jump in Bay Area resumes listing Greater Toronto Area inside 18 months. Google, Microsoft, and Salesforce have pledged 17,000 new Canadian seats since 2022, many carved straight from U.S. headcount freezes. The talent flow bends trade as surely as any tariff. Servers that might have spun in Oregon will hum in Quebec. Hydro data centers, pay stubs taxed in Ontario, will fund the Battery Corridor an hour down Highway 401. And startups born in Kitchener will IPO on the NASDAQ, while calling Ottawa their legal home. Immigration once defined America's edge. Now that edge is sharpening just across the border. If ideas move faster than trucks, what happens when the smartest cargo no longer needs a customs form to leave? 5 moves, none louder than a gavel, have redrawn the balance sheet of North American trade. Canada signed deals the U.S. abandoned, turned retaliation into shelf space, converted an abandoned Ford lot into the world's largest EV battery hub, banked a mineral arsenal every ally needs, and rolled out a red carpet visa that siphons Silicon Valley's next patents north. Each shift exploited the fine print of America's own choices, rather than breaking new ground. The result is a neighbor quietly richer in markets, materials, and mines. An advantage built while Washington argued over walls. Will U.S. strategy pivot before more factories, farm acres, and founders cross the 49th parallel? Or will the next trade war end before America realizes it's competing with yesterday's map?